the big challenge in spirituality is imagination. Not imagination per se, not the existence of imagination, but how easy it is to not recognize when you're imagining something as imagination, as opposed to imagining it and supposing it to be objectively true. This is. I talk about spirituality. Let me back up a bit. There's no such thing as spirituality. It's a big hornswoggle. It's a big scam designed to sell books and videos and retreats and things like that. What there is life. What there is this, right? Here you are. It's always been this. It's always going to be this. It's not like at some point it's spiritual and at some point it's not spiritual. This is the situation right here, whatever it is. Your being, your life, your what have you, is what's actual. It's always been actual, always will be actual. And so classify things as spiritual versus not spiritual, again, is an exercise in imagination. So now we can regress back to the beginning. The fundamental fact is, what this is indefinable. It's completely indefinable. It's not just complex and subtle. It's entirely indefinable. There's no way to pin down what's going on here, what anything is, or how it is, or why it is, or any context whatsoever. And all of our problems, all of our confusion, all of our entanglement and tripping over our own approach to our lives consists of this mechanism of, generally subliminally and unconsciously, so we don't know we're doing it, holding things to be a certain way. In other words, where you subtly think, or maybe not so subtly, think you know what something is, think you know what a condition objectively is. This is that. And by doing so, you effectively shut yourself off from the actuality, which intrinsically transcends any way you can hold it, any way you can see it. Because what this is happens to be such that it cannot be defined, it cannot be pinned down. It is literally infinite, substantially, structurally, in every way whatsoever. So both the coarse and the fine issues in spirituality always come down to this one issue. Beginners in spirituality, it's shocking to discover, wow, maybe there is a God, maybe there is whatever, maybe this, maybe that, which is a challenge to what you're imagining things to have been. You're just assuming that things are actually that way. In imagination, not recognizing it as imagination, holding it to be objectively true. And then, of course, that's a great revelation and a big aha. Wow, maybe it's not like that. And then typically you settle on a new way that it is, and maybe more subtle, more inspiring, more whatever way that it is, and land on that. And then you're in the pudding. Then you're starting to peel the layers of the onion, right? And then you get to a new, oh wow, but it's not even that. Wow, right? And then that's gone. And of course that precipitates you into the next layer of the onion. And of course it's an onion, so it's got no center, so it's layers all the way down as far as you want to go. If you look at the actual progress, so to speak, the actual path of spirituality for most people, it consists of this kind of more or less quantum jumps of ahas into new paradigms of, oh wow, wow, I sort of had it, but now, wow, I got a new, subtler, more profound version of it, which is great. And these revelations are not trite, and they're not necessarily inaccurate. They're just not true. And to get that is the case, to get that no way of holding this can be true. It cannot be true. It's impossible to get what this is. It's not a matter of your capacity. It's not a matter of lack of intelligence. It's not a matter of lack of skill of analysis or something. what this is intrinsically is such that it is impossible to know what it is. It's impossible to pin it down. It's an infinity. I mean, all these wonderful words like, the divine and God and Atman and, Dharmakaya and all this have been thrown around about what this actually is. And they're applicable, but it's not that. Of course, they're more imaginations. They're more points of orientation to whatever degree subtly that you orient towards it as being that is erroneous. So it's a conundrum, it's a challenge. Because, of course, our mind works this way, our imagination works this way. We're endlessly, spinning off these analyses, these versions, these takes on things. It's natural for us to try to orient ourselves towards our experience, towards our environment, towards whatever we take it to be. And typically we try and do it, at the most subtle or the give it our best shot. Whatever we're most capable of doing, rousing ourselves to at that moment or at that point, let's say, is how we engage with this. Which is all very well and good. We're all familiar with this. This is just, being you in your life, right? And it's very difficult to get off this treadmill. If not virtually impossible, I'd say. Because everyone's on it. There's so much reinforcement for it. Even when you go with people that are being very subtle and very intelligent and very sensitive with it, they're still basically on the same treadmill of trying to, refine the paradigm to the next finer paradigm. Of course the wonderful carrot on the end of the string, the wonderful promise is that there is an ultimate paradigm. There is a way that this is. You're going to be able to get it. There's an it that you can get somewhere sitting there that isn't it. And to get that there's no it is very strange. And it's not that there's no it. It's not that there's no reality. It's that reality is not an it. Reality is absolutely real. Reality is absolutely actual. Reality has all the bells and whistles, all the goodies that have been promised by all the, the sacred texts and the great sages and all that. In point of fact, it does. It is this. But it's not an it. It's not a thing. It's not. You can't find it. You can't get to it. You can't resolve it. You can't, put your hands on it. And yet, paradoxically, you can't not put your hands on it because it's ubiquitous. It's everything. It is you. It is this field of your present experience right here, right now. But the extent to which you orient towards your experience in terms of any definition whatsoever, no matter how subtle, no matter how profound, will be basically an impenetrable barrier that will keep you from noticing and appreciating what this actually is. And so this is a challenge. It's an interesting conundrum, and we all are immersed in it. This is intrinsic in being a human being and being in this condition that this situation presents itself. But it is possible. It is actually possible to get it. It's actually possible to see that this is... It's possible to see the paradox that this is. It's possible to see that this is completely unfindable and completely unlosable. It's possible to see that this is transcendently subtle and completely obvious. It's possible to actually let go, to be with this as it is. Because, of course, you are actually in that condition all the time. You never have not been. You've always been reality. You're real. You exist. This is it. This is the actuality right here. And, of course, it exists in its native mode. It exists in its actual condition as infinite, as undefinable. Always has. It can't not be that. But it can seem to be infinite different ways. And this is our challenge. We latch onto these seemings and orient towards them. And it's fine because the seemings are actually real. I mean, this is the part that makes it, that adds to the challenge of it. The seemings are real. They're true. You know, these insights we have are actually profound. They're real. They're there. They just aren't total. They don't capture what it really is. They just capture an aspect. So, I mean, one very simplistic way of putting this is pretty much any description you can give it, you can come up with something is true, but it's not the truth. Right? I am a male human being. That's true, but it's not the truth. Or I mean that's very coarse and obvious, but you can start getting more and more subtle and come up with these very subtle, very nuanced, very, very, intelligent descriptions of things, and they're true. So they're unassailable, but they aren't the truth. They don't comprehensively capture what this is, because it's uncapturable. It can't be done. Again, it's not necessarily a failing of intelligence or a failing of insight or a failing of intuition. It's that the very nature of what this is. It's like trying to capture, it's the turtles all the way down syndrome. How do you capture infinite space? Even calling it infinite space turns it into something that it's more than that, because it's infinite space. So there's this constant knife edge, this constant tightrope, and on one side you fall into that it's all the ways that it seems to be, which it does seem to be, and accurately so. And on the other side is what it is, which is can't find anything there. And we're always on this tightrope, and you never go to one side or the other, because it never stops seeming to be all these different ways. With just like a never-ending, like a dream, let's say, where it's just presenting one scenario and another scenario and another scenario. And they're all true, they're all real, they're all happening, but they're all actually intrinsically beyond what they seem to be. Again, no matter how subtly you're with what it seems to be, it is that, but it's more. So this is a very interesting situation. It's a very interesting situation we stumbled into. So in practical terms, what to do? And fortunately, there is a to do. You can learn, learn's not a very good word. You can recognize infinity. You can recognize the actuality of infinity because it is actual. It is always the case. It is always available. Nothing other than that is available. And more profoundly and more fortunately, you always have been recognizing it, so you're very, very familiar with it. So this is something that's doable, it's accessible. It's not like you need to develop some skills that you don't have or develop some profound insight that you have not been capable of heretofore or anything like that. It's a matter of allowing yourself to recognize the actual infinity of your concrete experience. Your concrete experience is infinite. You cannot find, in fact, anything within experience that is not infinite. And this becomes self-evident when you go looking for anything. Go look for, if any of you have played with that Veda. Go look for the viewer. Go look for the knower. You know, you just... And yet, there is knowing. But you can't find the knower. Go look for the known. Go look for anything whatsoever. You know, experientially. Look at color. Look at texture. Look at, you know, I'm saying look to imply the visual field, but you can do this within any sense field, within mental field, within fields of subtle energy engagement that we don't have classifications for as a sense field, and so on and so forth. Anywhere you look within experience, there is this amazing fact of presence. There is, let's say, there's something going on, let's just say, just coarsely, right? There's something happening. There's always something. Anywhere you look, you can't ever look anywhere and find nothing happening. Even if you look somewhere and find nothing happening, that's a something happening. A nothing as is the something that's happening. So, and you are always completely intimately engaged with anything you experience. It's not like the experience, let's say the imputed object of experience is over here, and there's some viewer over here, and there's some gap between them. If something shows up in your experience, it's like this, right? It is you. You are there. There's no distance. There's no gap. For example, when you dream at night, it's not like the dream is over here and you're over here somewhere watching it from a distance, right? It's how close are you to the dream? You are the dream. I mean, there's zero distance. And of course, this is the case with any experience. If you see something, you see it here. You are here, you're seeing it here. You know, you look outside and you see the sun. Where are you seeing the sun? You're seeing it here. You as a seer are here. The sun as a scene is here. And you're collapsing it down to a seer and a scene is gross imagination, gross definition, which is not actually findable. It's not actually provable. It's just an assertion. So anyway, so all experience is completely intimate. Oh, it already is. And this is not a matter of doing anything new, again, or of developing skills that have not been available. It's just a matter of noticing what is already always the case. That there is this amazing apparition that is you. I mean, in the sense that you can't find a you that's separate from it, and you can't find any distance between it and you. There's just this. Here this is, right? Where are you? Here. Where is this? Here. What is it that is here? How is it here? Well, that's a very interesting question, and there's no answer, but the actuality is right here to demonstrate to you with absolute precision and completeness that there is no answer. So, in other words, you can be with any experience with great intimacy, with great precision, and you discover its amazing slippery quality, its amazing multidimensionality, its intrinsic infinity, that nothing is resolvable to any condition of finality, to any condition of some core or seed or base or something that it ultimately resolves to as anything that you can find or define or put your hands on, so to speak. So simply noticing what your experience actually is with great intimacy and precision clearly and easily, in fact, and obviously reveals how strange it is, how weird it is. It's easy to realize that dreams are weird. The waking experience is exactly as weird. It's entirely as weird. It's completely strange and slippery. And this is not even subtle or esoteric. It's blatantly obvious if you look. And of course, we typically don't look because we think we already know what it is. We have a stance with regard to it. Oh, this is the world, or this is me, or this is whatever. This is a spiritual talk, We have some subtle definition that effectively we're relating to the definition, ignoring the actuality, which is always clearly, plainly, and completely unimpededly on display. So, we're our own worst enemy in this quest. We're our own best friend, because it happens that we are already this. We are already engaged in this. So it's kind of like being completely psychotic, and you get that. Gosh, I've always thought this is real, but I'm completely nuts. I'm a stone paranoid. I'm completely bonkers psychotic, and I live in an imaginary world. I'm not who I think I am. The world is not what I think it is. It doesn't work the way I think it is. I'm completely crazy. So there's this sort of bivalent condition going on where we're so used to orienting towards our fantasy world, thinking it's real, as crazy people do, of course. The sign of a crazy person is they don't know they're crazy, right? Everyone else is screwed up, right? So we don't know we're crazy, but if you can actually get a glimpse of that, if you can actually get a glimpse of, wow, there's something really amazing going on here, and it's, what's the Shakespeare quote? More things in heaven and earth than are dreamt of in your philosophy, Horatio, or something. It's something really weird going on here, and it's I've somehow totally missed it. It's completely beyond my version of things. What's up with that? And just catching a glimpse of that is enormously powerful, because it's like taking a pin and poking a balloon. Of course, it's a very slow motion balloon. So, it's maybe a better metaphor would be it's like putting a pin-sized hole in the Titanic. The boat will go down, but it might take a little while. So, this is billed as a presentation of the Yoga of Radiant Presence, which is a name that I made up for this suggested course of engagement with your experience. And the method is very simply to find yourself by hook or by crook with your experience outside of the context of your frame of reference, outside of the context of your definitions, which is actually easier to do than it sounds, because we're doing it all the time. We just don't recognize it. For example, anytime there's a wow moment, you see a beautiful sunset, and this happens to everyone, not just spiritual people, or everyone is continually having experience that's outside their frame of reference, but they typically write it off. We typically go, oh, I spaced out, or wow, that was fun, let me get back to what's on TV or whatever. And so we're continually actually having these moments that are just, what? And then, we typically come back to our normalcy, back to our life, back to our, engagement with the program. But the whole essence of this yoga, this mode of engagement, is to take advantage of these moments that spontaneously occur. It's not like you can necessarily do them. You can't really contrive it, because as soon as you try and contrive it, you come up against a whole can of worms of what you think you're doing and all that, and then you're plunged back into conceptuality. But still in all, you will and do find yourself from time to time in these moments of, oh, wow. You see a beautiful sunset, you see, you have a nostalgia, you hear a little bit of music that from your childhood or something, it just creates a mood, and somehow there's just this little, there's this moment of sort of some wow factor that's, you can't pin it down. It's just kind of a nice ambiguity. And then typically, you collapse back down to your routine, back down to your mode of participating in normalcy to one extent. But if you notice that these moments of noticing, these moments of being outside your frame of reference, are actual. Don't devalue them. Don't just write them off of, oh, I spaced out, that was nothing. And let yourself be sensitive to what's going on in that mode, in that context. You'll still fall back into your normal, so you'll still go back into your routine. Even if you start analyzing it and thinking about what just happened, that'll precipitate you back into a frame of reference, right? But sooner or later it'll happen again, inevitably. In the next nanosecond, in the next minute, in the next 5 minutes, in the next hour, in the next day, in the next week, in the next month, sooner or later you will notice yourself, wow, just in one of these spontaneous, non-relational, non-contextual, experiential actualities. And again, you just feel what that's like. Just feel what it's like. Don't just simply don't devalue it. Just let it be what it is, and let it be something, so to speak. And again, so this is sort of the cycle. You'll sort of have these little noticings and then fall back into referentiality. And sooner or later you'll have a little noticing and you'll fall back into referentiality. And the trick of it is that these noticings trump. The noticings win. The noticings dominate your normal mode, because they're real, they're actual, they're powerful, they're grounded, they're plugged into the mainframe. Whereas our normalcy is fabricated. It's a sham. It's like a movie set. It's cardboard facades. It's all sort of put in place more or less deliberately, albeit unconsciously, and has to be very actively maintained. But this background that is as it is, background, so to speak, in that context of that metaphor, that is as it is actual, it's real. So it has power, it has staying power, it has transforming power. And just the seed of allowing non sequiturs to be valuable, to not just instantaneously be devalued, instantaneously be ignored, empowers them, energizes them, and they begin to transform and in slow motion sink the ship or pop the balloon of your belief in, of your wholehearted orientation towards your worldview, your definitional idea of things.
Do they get longer?
Yeah. Well, they do. This is the point. They build up momentum. They begin to dominate. They begin to trump your let's say your normal mode, but in a very non-linear, unexpected, surprising way. Because most of what happens works under the table, works behind the scenes. So this is not a mode that is conscious or deliberate so much. You may have a certain conscious or deliberate sense of playing with this, of experimenting with this, of dabbling in this, so to speak. But nonetheless, the actuality is wholly irrelevant and irrespective of your conscious intent or how you approach it or something like that. It's much more like a subliminal undermining of your sense of yourself, of your sense of the world, of your sense of normal reality. Big fun for those who like to jump off cliffs. So anyway, that's a sort of a brief overview of what I'm about, and we can chat about that or discuss it or anything that you have any interest in. Once one finds oneself having stumbled into this mode, again, it feeds on itself and it develops itself spontaneously, intrinsically, under the table again, so to speak. So it's not something you need to do. It's more like, having taken the blue pill, or is it the red pill? I never remember which is which in the Matrix. It's like, whoops. And then you can't go back in the womb. You can't put Humpty Dumpty back together again. And reality will slowly disentangle you from your normalcy. And this happens spontaneously to everyone all the time, and formalizing it and dignifying it by calling it this specific, practice or spiritual philosophy or something is basically an absurdity. It is more just a device for acknowledging the nature of this process and seeing what it actually is, which can increase the efficiency of it, because we have less of a tendency to let ourselves stumble off into these, well-intentioned but completely deluded narrations and interpretations of what we think we're doing, what we think our path is, what we think our practice is, what we think our XYZ is. And in fact, all genuine spiritual realization occurs because of this process, let's call it, or this mode of finding oneself wholly outside of reference. And it can happen within spiritual traditions. I mean, Buddhists and Christians and yogis and school teachers and anyone can find themselves in this kind of a mode of being pulled beyond their normalcy. And it's irrespective of context, because it has nothing to do with the context. It's not about following the Eightfold Path. It's not about being a Christian. It's not about developing compassion. It's not about these various things. And yet it can occur in the context of these things or not, because it's about life itself. It's about the very nature of what this is, the very nature of consciousness. That its natural metabolism seems to be, over the long arc, seems to be that it forgets itself, and there's a relatively prolonged childhood where it is with itself very coarsely and relatively ignorantly. And then at a certain point, some kind of a spiritual adolescence seems to kick in where, unanalyzably, it begins to question itself. It begins to look, begins to go, wait a minute, what's going on here? And these intrinsic attempts to break out of the, to crack out of the egg, to break out of the womb, to see what's really going on, spontaneously appears and erupts within the individual's experience. And this happens. It's intrinsic. This is not something that you decide to do. An 8-year-old doesn't decide to become an adolescent someday. It just happens, right? And bang, you can't stop it. And likewise, genuine spirituality is an intrinsic maturing. It's an intrinsic being with what one is more intrinsically, more inherently, and letting go of heavy-handed, immature, partial modes of analyzing it and holding it to be. But one can participate in this intentionally and willfully. There's no reason to not be interested in this stuff. There's no reason to not engage in this. It's just that the actuality of the process, so to speak, is not really about that. But that doesn't preclude that happening. It doesn't preclude anything whatsoever. So, an interest in these things is a sign that you are at least into or this process of intrinsic spiritual adolescence is happening for you to one extent or another, and there's no reason not to be curious about it. There's no reason not to look at it. There's no reason not to want to try to engage with it more efficiently, more intentionally, more intelligently. And whether or not that actually does anything, so to speak, is irrelevant. And not to say that it won't, not to say that it will, because again, you can't say. Since you can't actually say what anything is, you can't say how anything works, so you can't say how anything doesn't work either. So you're completely at sea in terms of saying what the possibilities are, what can happen and what can't happen. It's all absurdity. It's more spin doctrine. It's more imagination. Delusion consists of addiction to specialness. Delusion consists of trying to find something that's great, that's wonderful, that's a problem solver, that's an achievement, that's a goal, that's glorious. And the reason that's a problem is because it diverts us from noticing what is actually supportive, actually nutritious, actually valuable, actually will give you everything you want, which is normalcy, actuality. We look for specialness, and it's like, I don't want this. It's like the pauper, who lives in a cave and all they have is their rock that they sleep on. They put their head on the rock, and that's their sole possession. And they're sitting there wishing they could have something special. And someone says, but you have this rock. And he says, no, I don't want the rock, I want something special. The rock, they're ignoring the fact that the rock is a nugget of pure gold. And they're wanting something special. And they're ignoring the treasure that they actually have. And this is a bit of a stretch. But nonetheless, it's a very accurate analogy for the situation here. That which is valuable, that which is sustaining, that which is nourishing, that which it gives everything, gives all qualities, is all value, is absolute normalcy, absolute just actuality. And so our addiction to specialness is the number one force, let's say, that keeps us from appreciating it, from taking advantage of it. It's like we have everything right here, and we're out somewhere looking somewhere else for what we want. How stupid is that? And of course, it's not stupid. We don't do it on purpose. It's well intentioned. We think normalcy is dull, uninteresting, not very not very pregnant with possibilities. And we hear these wild tales of all this wonderful stuff out there, riches and success and fame and having a lot of stuff and all this, and we, oh God, that sounds great. Where do I sign up? It's like, well, if your actuality looks like that, cool. But if you're using that as a way to divert yourself, in effect, divert yourself from what you actually have, you're shooting yourself in the foot. So this yoga essentially consists of learning to wean yourself, learning to appreciate the actual, learning to wean yourself of this addiction to specialness. Because specialness is fantasy. Specialness is imaginary. Specialness is not real. Whereas actuality is real, is not imaginary, and gives everything. Gives absolutely everything. It happens to be, inconceivable, spectacular, divine transcendence. Wow. Isn't that lucky? Normalcy could just be this horrible, dull normalcy that, the consensus reality fantasy holds that it is. But fortunately, very, very, very fortunately, that's not the case. It turns out that what is here is inconceivably spectacular. So normalcy turns out to be the prize. Normalcy turns out to be where everything worth striving for is to be found. And you already have it. You already are it. What could be easier? So it's just a matter of recognizing that fact. So the yoga has two phases. One phase is weaning yourself of specialness, basically letting go of specialness. And the second phase, which is the fine polishing phase, which is grad school, is letting go of letting go. And that's when it gets very subtle. Because it's relatively easy from the point of view of the goal, let's call it, to let go of specialness. But then you're in the very precarious position of being a successful let-goer, which is a fine place to set up housekeeping, except that it's not the goal. That is a very subtle specialness to which we can cling. I'm a great yogi. I'm realized I understand all this stuff. It's so wonderful. That's not the end. That's not the end. It's just another prison that is, that looks really cool from certain points of view. So, learning to let go is the first half of the yoga, and then letting go of letting go is the second half. And just really settling into normalcy. What's normal? It's normal. It's anything. It's, who gives a fuck? It's just, you're just you. All of this grandiose posturing is, it's bullshit. And this bullshit is the problem spiritually. And the solution is just what you already are. So that's sort of looking at it from a slightly different point of view. There's a great secret hidden in spirituality, and it's implicit in most powerful spirituality, and it's explicit in a few places. It's explicit in Dzogchen, it's explicit in Kashmir Shaikhism, it's explicit in some yoga. And this great secret is that experience itself, our normalcy itself, is actually made of inconceivable transcendence. It's actually made of, well, it can't be said what it's made of, because what it is made of is beyond what can be said, what can be measured, what can be thought. And of course this is the goal of spirituality. All spirituality starts with this mundane horror of our normal lifetimes, or maybe some of us not so horrible, hopefully. And by engaging in spirituality, you're supposed to find some kind of resolution, some kind of amelioration, some kind of benefit, some kind of value added that somehow either enables you to leave this situation or be with it more easily, or somehow find a fullness and a completeness and a lusciousness and a nourishment that may seem to be absent in our normal life, that may seem to be absent. We may seem to feel ourselves to be, an isolated person in a difficult environment with a lot of challenges of life and difficulty achieving anything that is, fulfilling, or that is enriching, or that is powerful. And spirituality promises to do that. It promises to do that in the ultimate sense. It promises to deliver the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. And I think so often it fails to deliver. Not because the pot of gold is not there, not because it is not actual, but because most spirituality has been waylaid into a kind of a social engagement, into a kind of various degrees of social club, various degrees of lifestyle engagement that enables one to have something to do during the day. I belong to being a Buddhist, or belong to being in a church, or belong to being this, or belong to being that, which becomes the goal in itself rather than a means to an end, the end being this promised transcendence, this promised pot of gold at the end of the rainbow, this promised divinity. And yet, in the deepest and the most powerful spirituality, and in fact, this pot of gold, this divinity, this absolute, infinite inconceivability is not an abstraction. It is concrete, it is actual. And it is what reality is actually made of, substantially. Nothing but, in fact. There's nothing that can be found that is measurable, nothing that can be found that is limited, that is finite, that is a problem. And it turns out that all of our problems, all of our confusion, all of our sense of being a limited being in a limited world arises from misinterpretation. We don't see what is actually here. We misinterpret it, we interpret it wrongly. Which is easy to do because what is here is so intrinsically slippery, so intrinsically subtle. Just very obviously, right now you are experiencing your experience by consciousness. What's consciousness? Oh, it's just consciousness. It's consciousness. It's right. It's consciousness. Sure, it's just normal old consciousness. Yeah, right. It's normal old consciousness. What is it? Where does it come from? What's it made of? What is putting this consciousness right here? And what is it that's being put here? What is consciousness? It's pretty trippy. It's pretty bizarre. It's pretty weird. It's pretty strange. It's obvious. It's right here. It's here all the time. You can't make it go away. You can't shut it off. There's no off switch to consciousness, is there? I mean, I'm not talking in the abstraction. I'm not talking some consciousness with a capital C. I'm talking about right here what you're actually experiencing your experience with. How's that happening? What's doing it? What's this coming from, And then what's being experienced? Well, I'm experiencing the room, just sitting here, the room's showing up in my consciousness. Okay, but when I say room, what am I referring to? I'm referring to, in the sense, in my field of vision, I'm referring to the presence of light. Well, what is light? Well, light's pretty weird stuff. There's always light in consciousness. You close your eyes, and there's light. How weird. You close your eyes and you go into a completely dark room, and you still see light. There's light in consciousness, always. You go to sleep, and there's light. You start dreaming, and there's light. Where does the light in your dreams come from? There's no lights on. No one left the lights on or turned lights on in your dreams, did they? It's just, how does that happen? Where's this light coming from? And how's it being experienced? What's this consciousness that it's showing up in? So, these things are actually very obvious, very concrete. You experience this continually. You can't not experience it. You can't shut it off. There's no off switch. There's no blinds you can pull down over the light or over the consciousness to block it out or make it go away, right? It just doesn't happen. So this, if you take the slightest trouble to look, it's really obvious that there's some very weird shit going on here. It's a very weird situation. It's not just, it's just another day, God, it's boring, I mean, it may be that, but what is that, when you look at what that's made of, what is this boring day made of? What is the dullness of our lives made of? It's made of consciousness showing up from nowhere, light showing up from nowhere, sound showing up from nowhere. All of these energies appearing non-stop, just always. All your fields of senses, all your sense fields are always full. You ever notice that? You're always, even when you close your eyes, your field of vision is full of light. Even when you go to sleep, your field of vision is full of light. Even when you're in complete silence, your field of hearing is full of sound. It may be a silent sound, but it's sound. It's not nothing. It's never nothing. Your field of your mind, the sense field of your mind, is always full of thought. There's always thought present, right? I mean, sometimes it's stormy and you're thinking and arguing with yourself and pissed off or whatever, and other times it's just this little gentle, little wispy thing. But it's always there. It's like, what is this? This non-stop light show of qualities showing up in your consciousness now, here, always. Right? I mean, isn't that the case? Does anyone's experience ever shut down, ever just like stop and then start again some other time? It kind of doesn't happen that way, does it? It's just ongoing. In fact, you can't. We try and stop it sometimes. We take drugs or we sleep or we meditate or we whatever, and it doesn't actually work. It doesn't actually do anything. It's still this, whatever this is, continues to be happening. And it's always now, and it's always here. You've never been anywhere other than here. Here always looks different, right? An hour ago, here looked different than it does now, but it was here, right? And now you're here, and here looks like this. And in 3 hours, you'll be somewhere else, and here will look like that, but you'll be here. You're always here. Here is this continually changing kaleidoscope of qualities, experiential qualities, but you're always the center of it. It's always happening in you. It's always happening in your experience, in the field of your experience. And it's always now. right? I mean, you can think, well, yesterday, what did I have for lunch yesterday? But that's a thought I'm having now. You can't go back to yesterday. Yesterday is an abstraction, and you can only hold that abstraction now. So everything happens now. And exactly how long does now last? Does now stick around? Does now kind of, it's about, lasts a couple seconds. Not like that, is it? It's instantaneous. I snap my fingers. How long before the snapping is gone? It's like, as soon as it happens, it's gone. It's like bang. It's like it may as well have never happened. It's completely nowhere, nothing. It's non-existent. It's only existent in the moment it happens. And how long is that? It's shorter than short. So everything only exists now, and now has no duration. That's pretty trippy, And these aren't abstractions. These aren't, just look and see for yourself. This is concrete. This is actual. This is, what is actually present, the way it is actually present. And the point is not that these are special. The point is that this is absolutely normal. It's never not that. But we don't typically notice that because we get all caught up in all of this soap opera and storyline and interpretations of the human drama, all of our semantic narration, all of our, gosh, I have such problems and I have to do this and I have to do that, and you should hear what happened to me last week. It was wonderful, and this, that, and the other. All of which are abstractions happening in my imagination now, here, in consciousness, which is inconceivable and yet actual. So just noticing how strange this normalcy is, and I don't mean by having to reach, by having to create, by having to even go to a lot of effort. It's obviously pretty weird if you just look at what's actually happening and the way it's happening, what's actually here and the way that it's here. And right away, where's your normalcy? Where's your dullness? Where's your separation? If you're here and everything that is real in your experience is always here in your experience, how could you be separated from anything? I see that golden Buddha across the room. Where do I see it? Here in my consciousness. If I was outside, I might look up in the sky if it was a clear night and see the moon. Where would I be seeing the moon? Here in my consciousness. If I close my eyes or turn my head, the moon disappears because it's not here in my consciousness. Oh, but it's still there. Well, sure, that's a thought you can have here in your consciousness. So once you begin to notice the way in which this is the case, it can be very interesting. It can be provocative. You can begin to wonder, wow, some interesting stuff going on here, and people in general aren't really talking about it. They don't seem to be paying a lot of attention to it. That's kind of cool, and if your interest is piqued, if you want to pursue it a little further, you might begin to see the extent to which these questions are answerable. So here's this consciousness. It's completely obvious, right, that your consciousness is present. It's undeniable. It's so obvious to even to say it is absurd. What is this? Is that question even answerable? And just before you just decide it isn't, maybe it is in some way, but maybe the answer will have a form that is unexpected, that is subtler or more open-ended than a simple answer of, what is 2 plus 2? Oh, it's 4. The answer is sort of simple and limited and semantic and specific. But it's not nothing. It's something. So if it's something, what is that something? What is it that's appearing in consciousness? What is light? Light is completely obvious. It's very explicit. It's not something that's at some remove. You can study light very much up close and personal anytime you want, because it's always in your consciousness. You can close your eyes and study light. In fact, that's one of the best ways to study it, because you'll tend to be less distracted by all the supposed objects and situations that you may be interpreting the light to be implying exists around you. You close your eyes, what do you see? You see, this little tiny flickers, instantaneous flickers of light in this form. This sort of imply these amazing patterns with a great deal of instability and dynamism. And so what is this that's appearing? How is it appearing? And again, you can study it very directly through engagement with it. How can you study it? Because consciousness is experiencing it. Consciousness is already studying it. The very act of experience is consciousness studying what's appearing in it. So just the very act of seeing alone already means that consciousness is engaged. And consciousness is not inert. It's not mechanical. It's not dull. It's not just like a rock or a machine that's sitting there. Consciousness is pure intelligence. It's powerful. It's potent. It's more than just a mechanism or something like that. It has hidden and surprising abilities. It has the ability to be inconceivably intimately engaged with everything that seems to appear in it right off the bat. And this engagement conveys reams of information, all kinds of information, innuendo and suggestion and all sorts of things. It's out of all this innuendo and suggestion that we create our idea of the world, right? I mean, how do you know what things are? You know what they are because they show up in your experience, and then you draw ideas from that and abstractions and figure it out. No, this is a cushion, that's a chair, this is a woman, this is a picture, this is a very gaudy, tasteless room, so on and so forth. But all of these, how do we come up with all of this semi-intelligent analysis? Because we have intelligence as a resource. Where does the intelligence come from? It's inherent in consciousness. Consciousness is intelligence. It's not just some passive mechanical thing. So, just by experiencing what is appearing, you have the power, you may have the power to experience it very subtly, to investigate it very profoundly in ways that you may not be used to exercising or acknowledging. And these modes of engagement, these modes of intelligent participation may embody meaning, may embody fruitfulness, may embody learning. You may be able to find out what these things are by engaging with them very directly. And I've invented a grandiose name for this, which is the Yoga of Radiant Presence, which is nothing other than this fact of experiencing your experience afresh with the idea of letting it show you what it is. Outside normal human context, outside of scientific analysis, outside of words and ideas, just experience it directly. And it's easy to do. We do it all the time. You learn more about what water is by putting your hand into a bathtub full of water than you do by reading books or reading encyclopedia about water. Just in that, you learn inconceivable quantities of meaningfulness, right? Same thing, you know more about light by being with light than by studying physics textbooks, so on and so forth. And there's no limit to how far this investigation can go. I invite you to find out for yourself. The fundamental point of the Yoga of Radiant Presence is presence. What is it that's present? What is it that is here? what is here, that is the point of all this, is absolute reality. God, the divine, the transcendental. It is all right here. It is all available. And that's the point of this or any other yoga. Otherwise it's just mind games to amuse yourself. But the power source, so to speak, what energizes it, what makes it valuable, what makes it actual, is the fact that there is something that is here, that is available, that is powerful, that is effective, that is intrinsically embodying and manifesting everything that you may aspire to in any of this stuff in spirituality. So, the presence of absolute reality is actual, it's concrete. The presence of divinity is actual, it's concrete. The presence of God is actual, it's concrete. And that is the powerful fact. That is what enables this to be effective, this to be actual, this to be, as I said, anything other than a game, a silly lifestyle pretense, or something to imagine, or something to aspire to. And the fortunate fact, as it turns out, is that reality is actually already completely manifest. It's completely here. This is real. This is reality. This presence, the presence that you experience as your presence, the presence of your experience, is the presence. It's the presence of actuality. It's the objective presence of reality itself. So that fact is powerful, and simply noticing that is the case, is all that is required to enable it to become effective, to enable it to begin to transform your sense of what's going on from the erroneous partial version that you may hold to what's actually the case. This presence that is here, it's the simple fact that this is present. Your experience is present. The present moment is present. Being is present. And this is completely accessible within your experience. This is obvious. It's not, calling it accessible is way too heavy-handed. Your experience is that. Your experience embodies that. Your experience is already is this presence. And this presence is the actual presence of reality. And we can take advantage of this fact for this sneaky yoga that demands no histrionics, no jumping through hoops and learning tricks and changing your name and wearing funny clothes and these kinds of things. It just, because this is actual, because this is present already, simply noticing that fact enables it to reveal what it actually is and the way that it actually is, that it's actually completely beyond what you may have thought it is, completely beyond what anyone has ever thought it is, beyond what is thinkable in human terms, and yet it is actual, it is already this, it can't not be this, it can't go away. It is what you are, it is what all of this is, and simply being with it, you can discover what it is in its own terms, and discover that all of the human philosophy and theorizing and ideas about what to do about this or how to approach it are unnecessary. It's like tax loopholes. There can all be all this tax, or you have to pay all this tax, you owe all this tax, and down there in the fine print somewhere it says, but by the way, you don't really have to. And if you go to that point, then you get to duck all of the stuff. And in mainstream spirituality, there's all of this, you have to develop thoughtlessness, you have to calm your emotions, you have to develop, good body postures and all of these things. You have to learn to meditate for long periods of time, so on and so forth, whatever. I mean, all these different paths and practices have all sorts of elaborate inclusions, requirements that they consist of. And it turns out that it's just redundant, it's unnecessary, it's not to the point. It doesn't actually accomplish anything along the main point, which is realizing reality. Realization simply means to realize reality, to realize actuality, to realize what you are, to realize what this is. This is the fabled enlightenment, this is realization, this is all of these fabulous superlative terms that different spiritual traditions throw around. It's simply about discovering what's actually going on here, what's actually here. And it already is actually here, it already is actually going on. And it's going on in and as your experience, so it's completely accessible, it's completely available. You can just check it out. And the only thing whatsoever that can get in the way of you doing that is you're thinking you already know what it is. So you don't look. We typically have all sorts of interpretations about what's going on here. Oh, this is a world, and I'm a human being, and I'm in a body, and I have my life, and I have my history. The whole curriculum vitae that is pretty much common sense reality for most people. But there's actually no evidence to support any of that. And if you look at what is actually here, outside of any preconceptions, outside of any expectations of what it should conform to, you will be able to discover very directly and very readily what is actually here and how it actually works, so to speak. And it turns out to be rather good news, because what is actually here is transcendental, is what people usually mean by the phrase God or the divine. It is beyond space, it's beyond time, it's beyond causality. And that's kind of cool. It has a whole different feeling to see that and to feel that that is your life than the feeling of being stuck in your difficult little life with all of its challenges and all of its hopeless conundrums and all of its, broken dreams and aspirations that can never be fulfilled and all these kinds of things, which are all, turns out, just imaginary anyway. And there's one thing that is here, there's one thing that is actual, there's one thing that is true. This condition of reality that is self-evidently present here is unique. It does not exist in relation to anything else. It is not understandable in terms of anything else. So it has to be approached in terms of what it actually is. We're all intimately familiar with it, of course. It's here. It's your field of experience. Experience is real. Experience alone is real. And all the conclusions and extrapolations that we've drawn based on the evidence of the presence of our experience is wrong, is inaccurate, is not true. We think we exist in a body, not true. We think we exist in an objective world, not true. We think there's space and time, not true. The depths to which consensus reality worldview is inaccurate is mind-boggling. So what is it that is here? What is reality? First, let me back up and say that the sole problem, the sole spiritual problem, or in fact the sole problem of any kind, is not understanding what this is, not understanding what is here and how it is here. All of our problems, all of our dissatisfaction, all frustration, all sense of separateness, dependence, weakness, failure, suffering, follows completely from misinterpreting what is here. And on the other hand, coming to understand what is here as it actually is what is called enlightenment. It's called liberation. It's called realization. It's called, all of these, very grandiose sounding terms that reverberate throughout spirituality. So it's a simple, it turns out in fact very simple, condition of coming to see what this actually is, that is the goal, that is what all the fuss is about. And in actuality, it's not that hard to do, because what this is right here. It's clearly displayed. It's not concealed. It's not hidden. There's no tricks to it. Reality is very easy to find. Reality is very easy to see and discover. But the catch is, unreality is hard to let go of. It's very hard to let go of our addiction to our worldview, our addiction to investment in who we think we are, in the details of our lives, and the soap operas and challenges of our goals and aspirations and all of these various things. Which it turns out are not true, they're not real. But they're seductive. We all know how juicy it is to be in the thick of our lives and struggling with trying to achieve or trying to overcome or trying to just enjoy whatever, just all this trying we do and all this pithiness, and we're all caught up with ourselves. We're very full of self-importance. Our life matters to us. We really like our lives. We're caught up in it. And this is the challenge, actually. This is the challenge, the seductiveness of our lives. It's very much like TV. It's like getting caught up in a TV show. So you're sitting in an airport or something, and there's a TV screen just sitting there playing some silly show or whatever. It's so easy to just sort of, you get sucked into it and zone out, and all of a sudden you're just sucked into this world that's implying all of these various things, and you're getting jerked around and pushed around, and, it's basically hypnosis, all this suggestion of, you're being auto-suggested, well, not auto-suggested in this case, but suggested that, this is happening and that's happening and this matters and this is important. And of course, what happens? We get seduced right into that, and all of a sudden we're feeling it to some extent. And we do exactly the same things with the details of our lives and the things that seem important and seem so urgent. So, if coming to see reality is the point of the whole thing, what is it? Well, it's right here. This is it. This is reality. This right here is it. The presence of your being, the presence of your experience is the totality of reality. There's no other reality. There's no more reality. Your experience actually does not exist in anything else. Your experience is not actually a subset of anything else. It doesn't come from something else, which is very counter consensus reality. Consensus reality is this big world out there, and it's real, and somehow you just came into being as this tiny little extrusion of it, and here you are, this little dependent, vulnerable thing existing in this vast reality that's so much bigger than you and so much realer than you. It's not like that. The reality is much more like a dream. The world exists in you. Here's your experience. Where's the world? Where do you look to find the world? Right here, in your experience. Can you find a world anywhere else than in your experience?
Where does experience come from? Well, you can't say, can you? It's just here. Does experience come and go? Is it dynamic? Is it change? Well, it doesn't, does it? I mean, it's always is, here now, always is. It's the same isness. It doesn't get more is or less is. You go to sleep, the isness, it looks very different, but the isness doesn't go away. It's not like you stop existing. So, this is here. Your experience is here. And everything that you think exists within your experience. That's where it is. That's where it can be found. And it can't actually be separated out of your experience. So everything we think exists is an abstraction, an analysis, a hypothesis, basically a fantasy about experience. It's just like in a TV show. TV's a really nice metaphor. The TV metaphor of spirituality. In TV, there's no people, there's no things, there's no world, there's just little flashes of light on the screen. And yet you can watch TV and you get sucked in, and all of a sudden you're seeing people, you're seeing things happen, you're seeing there's objects and people are moving things around and passing things back and forth to each other and all this. There's no people, there's just flashes of light, there's just dots of light. So the existence of all of these apparent objects and entities that we abstract into the experience of the TV show is fantasy, it's imaginary, based on actual energy patterns appearing experientially. All that's there is the patterns. There's no things, there's no entities, there's no transaction. Of course, we all know this very intimately from our dreams. In the dream, the same thing happens. In a dream, what can happen? Anything can happen. You can be involved with people, you can be involved with things, you can have all sorts of amazing events happen and so on and so forth. It can be very emotional. And you wake up and you look at it and you go, there was no one there. There was nothing there. There was not even a world there. There was no space there. You can have a dream of the Grand Canyon. You can have a dream of, looking at galaxies, and you wake up and it's like, that didn't happen in any space. Space happens in experience. Experience doesn't happen in space. Here's a space, right? This is space. This room is a apparent space that you seem to be in. And yet, if you look more closely, the space of the room is in your experience. Your experience is the real space. You close your eyes and the space of the room is gone. You walk out of the room and the space of the room is gone. What happened to the space that's outside this building? You might say, oh, well, it's still there, of course. The world doesn't disappear when we close our eyes. Doesn't it? In actuality, it does. It's an article of faith that it doesn't disappear. It's an article of faith that New York is still there, just because we can't see it. But an article of faith is what? A notion in your consciousness. So New York is a notion in your consciousness. For that matter, San Rafael's a notion in your consciousness. This room's a notion in your consciousness. The presence of all of this field of light is not a notion. It's actual. It's energetic presence, right? Vision is present. It's undeniable fact. Light is present in consciousness. But that's the only fact, as far as light's concerned, is that it's present in consciousness. Not what it is, or the light is about objects in a room, in a space, in an environment where things are happening. Look at the fact. Just look at the simple fact of your experience. The only thing you can find. Don't take this as an article of faith. I invite you to investigate for yourself. But I think you'll find that the only thing you can find is the actual energy presence of your experience. What you might call your field of vision is a field of light appearing in your consciousness. What you might call sound is a field of, vibrations appearing in your consciousness. You might call thought is a field of mental vibrations, whatever the heck, appearing in your consciousness. And that's all you can find is those energy presences, which are instantaneous. They happen only now, right? There's no light. You can't find light from yesterday. You can't find light from tomorrow. The only light you find is this actual light right here, right now. Right here it is. Feel this, feel this light that's here. It's real. It's actual. What is it? Well, I can't say. But that's all, that's the sole fact, is the fact of the presence of these energies in experience. And based on the presence of these energies in experience, the imagination runs wild. Oh, this is a world, this is a town, these are people, this is a room, this is a spiritual talk. I'm going to go home and go to my life, and I have my friends, and I have my this, and I have my that. All of which is just arbitrary designations of what? Patterns of energy in your experience. Patterns of energy are real. The rest of it is pure imagination. It's made up. It's hypotheses. Maybe this pattern is a person. Maybe that pattern is a different person. Maybe this pattern is a room, right? Maybe this pattern is words. Maybe the words mean something. It's all theories. It's a nice theory. It's a neat hypothesis. Could be. But the fact is simply the real-time presence of energy in experience. So what? It's all completely obvious. Of course, everyone knows this. But it's more fundamental than that. It's more primal than that. To recognize fantasy as fantasy, and to recognize actuality as actuality, is the essence of the discrimination that is required for sanity. This discrimination is required for realization, the discrimination that is required to find out what's really going on here. And typically, most of us are completely muddled in a confusion between what's actual and what is fantasy. We may think that our interpretations are somehow true. Just like when we dream, if we think there's a bear chasing you, if you think there's a bear really chasing you, that's insanity. There's no bear chasing you. It's a dream. The reality is it's a dream. That there's a bear chasing you is pure fantasy. There's nothing wrong with fantasy. Fantasy is actual. Fantasy exists. But fantasy is fantasy. Fantasy is not actuality. That's the confusion. That's actually the difference between sanity and insanity. You find some crazy person wandering on the street yelling and screaming, and they have some crazy story in their head, interpretation of what's going on. They think it's true. They think it's actually happening. And you think, God, the poor sod, he's just absolutely clueless. He's nuts. And the essence of that nutsness is he's believing his own fantasies to be objectively true. And this is pretty much a description of the common condition of virtually all humans. People are stone bonkers. People are completely nuts. People are fucking out of their gourds because we believe our fantasies are objectively true. We believe, this is a room. This is time. This is a spiritual talk. I am a person. I am in my body. All of these interpretations, which are simply hypotheses. Maybe that pattern of dots on the TV is a person. Maybe the sound coming out of the speakers is that person talking. Maybe there's interactions happening between these pattern of dots that might be a person and that pattern of dots that might be a person. That's all fine. That's how you enjoy TV. That's how you enjoy a movie. There's nothing wrong with doing that. But if you went to a movie and you thought it was really happening, if you started ducking when the bad guy started shooting at the movie, the people sitting around you would think you were, God, poor guy, he's nuts. And yet, this is what most people do, typically, within their normal functioning. And they think it's normal. They think it's sane. They think, yeah. So what is really here? What is really present? Well, I invented a technical phrase to describe that. I call it radiant presence, which is a rather precise way of putting it. What is present? What are its characteristics? Well, it's actual. It's really here. It really is. Being is. Your experience is actual. It's undeniable. It's not. You can't argue whether or not you're having an experience. It's undeniable fact. It's self-validating. Here it is, right? So this is present. This is present. Something is present. There is present, and this presence is real. It's actual. It's undeniable. It is objectively true that there is presence. What else can you say is objectively true? Well, there's qualities. There's all of these qualities. There's what we call color, there's what we call sound, there's what we call, thought, there's what we call sensation. There's all of these amazing modulated qualities, just an energy bombardment of constantly changing, just little flavors, right? Just continually showing up in experience. It never stops. You go to sleep and they're still there. You start dreaming, they're still there. You wake up, they're still there. Just all of these flavors, all these characteristics. And I call that radiance, because it radiates unstoppably, dynamically from this presence. The presence, you don't need to go to the presence and ask it to do something. The presence is in your face. It doesn't stop. It's like a spotlight that has no off switch. It's continually shining forth all of this incredible spectrum of qualities and characteristics within experience. And of course, that's this presence, this that is, and all of this qualities that are showing up. So radiant presence. Is there anything else? Anything else? And anything and everything that you may think of exists is just a hypothetical extrapolation, essentially in fantasy, in imagination, based on an interpretation of the way the patterns of radiance are presenting themselves. I can tell there's people in this room because of the visual outlines of certain characteristics of color and texture and contrast that appear within my field of vision. And I call these that have some degree of relative internal coherence relative to their background, which have a different degree of relative coherence. And so I can look and say, oh, that's a body, that's a rug, that's a chair, that's a body. And so I can hypothesize that, oh, so these shapes are bodies, so that means that they're humans. And they're moving, so that means they're not dead. They don't smell. But all that is hypothetical. It's fantasy. The fact is all of this color in terms of my field of vision, right? Okay, how many people are here? As far as I know, one. I'm here. There's no one else here that I can know. I can hypothesize maybe these shapes here that I'm interpreting as people are also experiencing the way I do, but I can't know that. How can I know that? So I'm the sole person here, and you all are hypothetical possibilities within this potential field of action. Very much like a dream. In a dream, you can have all sorts of meaningful interaction with all sorts of people and things, and you're the only one there. They're not actually there. You may interact with them as if they're there, and there's no reason not to. Why not? What the heck? Who cares? Nothing lost. It can be very interesting. But to fall into the belief that they are there on the basis of no direct evidence is insanity. It's to fail to distinguish between imagination and actuality. In actuality, you have experience of exactly one consciousness. As far as you know, that's the only consciousness. Right? Am I wrong? I mean, we can imagine that if it's a good theory, maybe there are other consciousnesses, maybe there are other beings, and that's fine, there's no problem with that, but notice that it's a theory, and that's so great. So you can act provisionally as if maybe that's true. But to then take the leap that, oh, that is true, and I'm stuck with that as a fact, is to be entrapped in delusion. It's just as if I thought I was Napoleon. I'm stuck being Napoleon. Which would be fine if I was, but I'm not.
How do you have a relationship with someone?
Usual way. How do you have a relationship with people in your dreams? Interaction is a good way. And what is interaction? Interaction is energy dynamism, right? I mean, how do you eat? Energy dynamism. It's a direct energy engagement. You can't figure it out. You can't analyze it. How do you do that? How do you see somebody? How do you talk to them? How do you feel them? How do you taste food? Well, you can't say, but it obviously happens. And what happens is radiant presence. What happens is dynamic, meaningful energy presence appearing within the soul consciousness, i.e. yours. What's happening here is inconceivable. It's absolutely inconceivable. It's completely beyond describability in many human terms, with language, with thought, with any kind of a symbolic modeling system in any way whatsoever. There is something happening here, self-evident. There is one thing happening here. It is actual. It is exactly as it is. And yet it cannot be approached in terms of human describability. It cannot be approached in terms of philosophizing about it or reading about it or discussing it or having it explained to you or having it approached in terms of any kind of model. It cannot be modeled. It is exactly as it is and not otherwise. And this, of course, is very contrary to our normal human mode. Typically, if we want to learn something, we ask, we try and find descriptions, we try and find explanations, we try and find, someone to give, to tell us what it's like, how it works, how to get into it, how to figure it out. And what's happening here, it is not of that quality at all. So it's a very strange phenomenon that's actually going on here. But it is possible to engage with it. It is possible to come to understand it. It is possible to explore it. But not through normal, typical human means, not through normal modes of learning, not through normal modes of teaching, not through working with descriptions. Fortunately, it happens that what is happening here, even though it is entirely non-linear, entirely transcendental, is accessible because you are it. You are in it. You are entirely non-linear. You are entirely transcendental. So you can meet this where it is because you're already where it is. This is difficult for us to acknowledge, and it's difficult for us to access, perhaps, to the extent we're brainwashed in normal human ways of understanding, normal human ways of thinking about what we are, normal human ways of thinking about what's happening here and how it works. But we don't need to be limited to that, because in actual fact we aren't limited to that. A vast portion of our functioning is already happening very non-linearly, very irrationally, very acausally. And typically we don't acknowledge this because we can't talk about it. You can't sit down with someone and say, "What did you do yesterday?" "Well, there's no words. You can't finish the sentence. And as human beings immersed in this culture, we're constantly having reinforced to us these normal human modes. Where people are throwing words at us and expecting us to throw words back, and it's all about describability. It's about what you do and how you do it and what you think and what you like and what you don't like, and all the stuff that makes up the normal human soap opera, which we're all, of course, very familiar with. But what's happening here is entirely beyond that, entirely beyond that. So that being the case, the easiest, most direct, most efficient way to access it is outside the context of the human soap opera, outside the context of normal human thinking, normal human modeling of what's going on here, which we all have within our experience. Within our experience, we all have, everyone has, all sorts of ranges of experience that you can't describe, you can't put into words. Subtle feelings, subtle vibes, subtle little spaces of experience, of flavor, of, there's no words for it, so obviously I can't say what it is. But the describable portion of our experience is actually minuscule. It's actually minuscule. The portion of our experience that we can actually accurately capture in words is tiny. And the vast lion's share of our experience is very nonlinear, very strange, and yet very contentful, very actual, very pregnant with all sorts of implication and qualities. And this being the case, by simply noticing that fact, by simply acknowledging the richness that exists within these undescribable portions of our experience, and attending to that, we begin to acquire more sensitivity to those modes, more sensitivity to what's going on. We kind of shift gears out of normal human modes of engagement, normal human modes of thinking of ourselves and thinking of what's going on, and to acknowledging the actuality of this whole other realms of actuality, of presence, of qualitative presence that's completely indescribable, completely doesn't consist of things, doesn't consist of actions, doesn't consist of beings, but it's not nothing. There's a lot going on there. And this is vital, it's vibrant, it's real, it's actual. It is pregnant with meaningfulness. And this meaningfulness reveals itself as its own intrinsic transcendental quality. In other words, the fact that it is beyond describability is not just, doesn't mean we haven't made up enough words. It means it is intrinsically funny, it's intrinsically weird, it's intrinsically strange, it's intrinsically slippery, it's intrinsically non-linear. It doesn't lend itself to that kind of a mode at all. And yet it's actual, it's real. And by acclimatizing ourselves to this kind of qualitative nature, we can develop a sensitivity to this kind of non-linear being, non-linear, call it functioning, and come to discover what we are and discover what this is. And from that perspective, surprisingly enough, or perhaps not surprisingly at all, if you look back on your so-called human normalcy, it turns out to be just the same. It turns out to be not normal and not human at all. It turns out to be itself very non-linear and very strange. I mean, we all sort of take for granted, we live in this material universe and we're human beings, we're these sort of semi-evolved primates and we're clever to an extent and we can walk and talk and function and all this stuff. And we've all more or less been sold on that paradigm. But what is this that's going on here? What is a personality? What is a body? What is matter? What are these astounding phenomena that are going on? And even those phenomena that we're used to thinking of as normal, as, just plain, dull, boring, business as usual humanity, turns out to be very, very strange, very, very non-linear. And when we get a sense of these qualities, this becomes quite apparent. And then we begin to see that what's happening here is amazing, is astounding, is incredible. What this is incredible. What you are is incredible. The way it works is incredible. All the books, these elaborate spiritual teachings that sound so completely outrageous, you are God, everything is the divine, all these, there's nothing here but being, consciousness, bliss. All these things are seen to be actually just simple statements of fact, rather than some amazing exaggeration that, boy, wouldn't it be nice if that was true? It's just, that's actually kind of how it is. I mean, it doesn't really fill in the blanks in terms of explaining it or describing it. But then, of course, maybe that can't really be done so easily. Maybe what this is doesn't lend itself to that kind of treatment, doesn't lend itself to that kind of deconstruction where you can try and make sense of it or describe it or say, well, yeah, it's like this and it works like this, and it's a little funnier than that, it's a little stranger than that. Well, okay, a lot stranger than that. But we can come to know this very directly, very intimately. We can access this. We can come to see the truth of this, see the way it works for ourselves, and all this becomes very self-evident. But this is very challenging to do as long as one is trying to approach it from within the human frame of reference. But again, fortunately, that's not an issue because, as I said, a large part of our actual experience is already outside the human perspective, so we already have our foot in that door. So it's really just a matter of coming to notice that this is the case and pay attention to these kinds of qualities of our experience that are already fully in effect and acknowledge them, value them, instead of just writing it off as sort of noise in the machine, Well, my life is just, what I can think about and talk about, and then there's all this weird stuff in the background, but, don't pay any attention to it. It's just noise or something. Maybe it's not noise. Maybe there's something going on there which is really valuable and really interesting, which of course. True yoga consists of intelligent engagement with subtle energy, exploring subtle energy and integrating with subtle energy. And this yoga, the strategy, the point of doing this is to achieve realization, to achieve God realization, to achieve self-realization, to achieve enlightenment, to achieve freedom from karma, to achieve all of these various promised goals, which are, of course, all actually the same thing, which is what one discovers ultimately when one discovers what this is. There's many different branches of yoga. There's all sorts of classifications of this, karma yoga, hatha yoga, raja yoga, bhakti yoga, jnana yoga, and all sorts of classifications, which are actually fairly arbitrary. But none of these yogas are yogas per se. What they are is jumping off points. What they are is, let's say, mediums of engagement that can then within the context of which yoga can become practiced. To become yoga proper, the yogi has to transcend, the starting point has to transcend the aspect of their experience that they're focusing on, and move into using that as a way to engage with subtle energy. Until one is explicitly engaging with subtle energy, it's not yoga proper, it's not real yoga, even if it's called yoga. Of course, 90% of what people think they're doing in the world as yoga is not actual yoga, according to my definition. Because a good analogy is playing music. If you want to learn to play music, say you get a guitar and you're practicing playing guitar, you're practicing guitar. That's not necessarily playing music. When you play music, you're using the guitar, but you're transcending the fact of being engaged with the guitar to be engaged with music, which is an energetic flow, a profound expression of your being, which transcends the nuts and bolts of how you hold the guitar, how you hit the notes, whether you play these notes together or those notes together, and so on and so forth, which you may be more engaged with when you're learning guitar. And or with anyone that's mastered anything, someone that's mastered a sport, someone that is that is competent in any field, they are not that concerned with the nuts and bolts of what they're engaged with. They use that as a medium for a spontaneous functioning that is the expression of their mastery in that field. So, for example, in karma yoga, one is engaged with the circumstances of one's environment, the circumstances of one's life. One's interacting with what presents itself as one's life in various ways. And this is the jumping off point for karma yoga. But as long as you're just concerned with those details in themselves and you stop there, you're not actually practicing karma yoga. You're just working on living your life a certain way, which is fine, right? But when you get to the point of being with it more subtly, being with it more profoundly, being with it more intelligently, and you begin to tune into the subtle energies that are present, begin to tune into the nature of what is manifesting as the circumstances in your life, the nature of your consciousness, the nature of the patternings and the intelligence and the way the flow of events unfolds itself on a more subtle level, that's the point where you enter into yoga proper. And the same, that's an example of karma yoga. The same is, in Raja Yoga, which is typically, most systems is defined as meditation yoga. If you're meditation, you're sitting and you have your posture and you're holding your mind still and all this. That's not yoga proper. That's practicing of it. That's setting the stage for the chant of yoga. But when you transcend the technique, when you transcend, I'm doing this, or I'm doing that, and this is the way I'm doing it, and I'm doing it the way I'm supposed to, and all that, and you use that as a jumping off point for being with what is here, being with this actuality in a more subtle and more profound way, that is the entrance into yoga proper. And yoga converges. All of these ways of classifying the different types of yogas are only really interesting and valid from a very superficial point of view. Because by the time it gets into being a genuine yoga, you've transcended what it is you're doing, and essentially all the yogas converge. Someone that is a masterful karma yogi, or a masterful bhakti yogi, or a masterful raja yogi is basically doing the same thing. That just that superficial, apparent mode of engagement may seem to be different, but what they're actually doing at that point is engaging with this actual subtle energy that they consist of, that their environment consists of, which is true yoga, which is what yoga actually is. And anyone who has realized, anyone who is enlightened, has done so, has come to that through this profound, intelligent integration with subtle energy. So what is this subtle energy? This is really the question. What is this subtle energy? If subtle energy and engaging with subtle energy is the crux of yoga, what is it? What is subtle energy? Well, you say it's the subtle energy that makes up reality, and that sounds pretty abstract. I mean, that sounds like all of a sudden we're talking philosophy. You know, what do you do with that subtle energy that makes up reality? But it is your experience. Subtle energy is what is showing up as your experience right now and always. In fact, there is nothing in your experience right now but subtle energy. What you may think of as consciousness is actually subtle energy. What you may think of as sensory experience is actually subtle energy. What you may think of as other beings in the world and so on and so forth is actually subtle energy. It's what it's made of, that's all. Not in the most, I'm not talking in some esoteric philosophical sense. It just literally, this is the substance of what's happening here, what it's made of, what is the what that is present here. What is present here right now is subtle energy. A physicist might say, oh, it's, subatomic particle energy events or gravity waves or quarks or strings or whatever, which is just glorified elaborations of what? An actual present energy. That is subtle because it's difficult to pin down. It's difficult to get to the bottom of what it is. Physicists don't know what anything is. They have very elaborate experimental investigation of this, that, and the other in terms of being able to describe a lot about it, but they don't know what it is because it's subtle. What's consciousness? We all know our consciousness intimately. You're conscious. Consciousness is right here. It's completely obvious. It's a no-brainer. And yet, what is it? It's subtle. It's trippy. It's weird. It's like a mirage. It's so obvious, and yet you go look for it. You try and put your hands on it, so to speak. Try and pin it down, and where is it? You can't even find it. And what is your experience? I mean, let's take a catalog of what our experience is. So there's a field of vision present, right? So, let's assume that we all have more or less functioning sensory systems in our bodies and so on. So there's a field of vision present, right, as experience. There's a field of sensation present, right? Field of hearing, the sound present. There's a field of smell, field of taste, field of thought. And what else? Well, there's a lot else, but we don't have a categorization for it because it doesn't really have a physical correlate. It's hard to talk about in terms of physiology or in terms of a materialist basis of analysis. But there's all sorts of subtle flavors and vibes and nuances and inspirations and moods and, that, of course, we all experience. This constant tidal fluctuation of what being alive feels like from moment to moment, constantly ongoing, and so on and so forth. And again, if you go looking for all of this, for any of this, you discover it's subtle. It's obvious, but it's not definable. You can't get to the bottom of it. Vision, the field of vision, for example, is completely obvious, right? I mean, the fact that your field of vision is present is a no-brainer. It's just, well, yeah, duh, I'm seeing, yeah. But then, what exactly is it? What is it that's present? How is it present? What's it made of? How is it showing up? How is it being perceived? And all of a sudden, it is completely obvious. It's right here. You can look at it. You can ask these questions concretely. You can ask these questions very pragmatically, but you don't get a simple answer, do you? It's not like, oh yeah, well sure, yeah, it's just light, and light is such and such and such and such, and yeah, okay, check it off the list. Now we know what vision is. It's not like that. It's a subtle, very dynamic, actual energy present, right? And you look at anything, look at sound, you find the same thing. Look at thought, you find the same thing. Look at all these other various subtle energies, you find the same thing. Look at consciousness, you find the same thing. The sense of your being, I am. That's completely obvious to me. And I assume that I am is obvious to you in your personal version of I, right? And yet, as obvious as it is, go looking for it. Okay, what is this obvious? Yeah, of course I am. Okay, what is this being? It's actual. It's undeniably actual. And yet it's subtle. It's nuanced. It's delicate. It's multidimensional. It's not a simple thing that's just sort of sitting there and you can go, oh yeah, okay, now I know what that is. It's not like that, is it? So all of these actualities, this substantial presence of your experience is very obvious in its presence. It's very obvious as a presentation. But this presentation is like a point of contact with what? A point of contact with something that doesn't just stop there. It's not like, oh, it's a simple thing that's just sitting there. It's a point of contact with something that just somehow goes on from there in a way that's unresolvable, in a way where you can't find the end of it, you can't find the bottom of it, you can't find the edges of it. It's a lot like maybe what the ocean might look like. The surface of it is completely obvious. It's just, here's the ocean, you're looking at the ocean, but that's just a surface of something that just goes on, and it's vast, and it's very different, and it's different levels, and deep currents underneath, and so on and so forth. And our experience is like this too. And so, yoga is noticing this fact in practice. Yoga is noticing this starting point is presenting itself, but it's a presentation of something more, something subtle, something vast, something nuanced, something with, let's just say, with implication. and the following of that, going into that with intelligence, with engagement, is the path of yoga. So one cultivates a sense of subtlety, one cultivates a sense of sensitivity, of being able to be with what is explicit very, very gently, very delicately, very subtly and sensitively, in order to intuit or to feel your way into, so to speak, what it actually is. And as we do this, we come to discover what this subtle energy is. And it's very interesting. It's very, I use this word trippy again. I'm betraying my old hippie roots. But it's the nature of subtle energy is very strange because, again, it is intrinsically unresolvable. It's not like you explore it and you explore it and you learn more and more and you accumulate more and more and all of a sudden you get it and you've gotten to the end of it and now I know what it is. It's not like that. It's exploring something that is intrinsically infinite, something that is intrinsically open-ended. It's like exploring deep space or something. You come to know it generically as what it is. You come to know it in terms of its subtlety and nuance, but you never get to the end of it. It's an endless exploration. It's a bottomless opening into vastness, which makes it challenging Because it's not like someone can just tell you what it is and you look for yourself and you go, okay, yeah, that's what it is. It's not like that. There's a lot of different ways to try to imply what it is. I mean, we're all familiar with all of these various teachings. It's this, it's that, it's the other, And none of them are definitive. None of them actually hit the nail on the head and say what it is. They're all just hints. They're all just aspects. It's like the famous 5 blind men and the elephant. What's an elephant like? Well, it's like a rope. It's like a wall. It's like a tree trunk. It's like a snake. It depends on how you're engaging it. Depends on the way you're looking at it, what it looks like. And subtle energy is the same thing. So a little bit more about this. There is nothing but subtle energy. It presents as infinitely divergent, infinitely varied, and yet it's just one thing. It's very strange. It presents as light. It presents as thought. It presents as sensation. It presents as, well, anything that shows up on any level of subtlety or grossness or obviousness is this same subtle energy. So this subtle energy is a mysterious essence, let's say, that can present as however it presents. It can present as this and that. It can present as all of these phenomena that we experience concretely as our experience. So what kind of thing is that? That's pretty strange. It's a lot like asking what a dream is. And you can dream. What's a dream look like? Well, it looks like anything. It can look like seeing something. It can look like feeling something. It can look like hearing. It can look like smelling and tasting, I suppose. It can look like thinking. It can look like all sorts of actions and activities and amazing dynamisms and morphings and mutations and what have you. And yet, there's nothing there but dream. You wake up and where was the light you were seeing in the dream? There was no light. Where was it shining from? It wasn't. Where were the things you were feeling in the dream? They're nowhere. It was just dream. And yet dream is this mysterious, subtle, strange, undefinable phenomena or essence that can present as that, as all of this, as this vast field of differentiation, this vast field of explicit phenomena. I mean, look at light. You can look at your field of vision, for example. It's very simple, semi-coherent, single field of experience. And there are no 2 points in your field of vision at any time that are identical. You're always seeing maybe slightly, maybe grossly different shades of color, shades of brightness, shades of contrast, shades of, just all sorts of qualitative presences that are showing up. So here's this one phenomena, vision, one phenomena, light, and yet it looks like this, that, this. I mean, look, anywhere in your field of vision, you'll see something different. And spatially, in terms of the spatial extension of your field of vision, and then look at the same, relatively, approximately, point in your field of vision, and it'll look different in the next instant. Even if you're looking at the same thing, it morphs, it changes in subtle ways. I mean, this is a very simple experiment you can try. Sit in front of a blank wall with steady illumination, and don't move. Just sit there with your eyes open, looking at it for a while. And what does the wall look like? And you'll think that someone turned on a movie projector or something. The wall will start oscillating and moving and flashing and changing color and changing contrast and all of these things. And you will not have the same experience of that visual presentation in 2 consecutive instances. Or in any 2 instances, whether they're consecutive or not. I mean, what does consecutive even mean? So this is one of the interesting aspects of this subtle energy. It presents itself as infinitely differentiated than itself, and yet it never departs from itself. It's just light. It's just vision. Or in a more global sense, it's just experience. But experience looks like vision, thought, emotion, sensation. It looks like all of these things which seem to be so different. They seem so drastically different texture, different phenomena, and yet they're ultimately the same thing. So why yoga? What's all the fuss about? Why is it so hard? Why are there so few, maybe, apparently, realized beings wandering around? What's the impediment? So if this is the subtle energy, and everything is made of it, then everyone's doing nothing but yoga, because everyone's engaged with subtle energy, right? That's what life is. Life is engagement with subtle energy. What else is there to be engaged with, right? And this is profoundly true. In actual fact, there's nothing other than yoga. There's nothing other than the presence of subtle energy presenting itself to intelligence, to consciousness. And yet, there's this wonderful, this astounding phenomena. In Hinduism and much Indian philosophy, it's been personified wonderfully as the principle of Maya, which is just delightful. Which is essentially to sort of sum it up, the principle that things can seem other than they actually are. They can seem as if they are different than what they actually are. And the basis, and this principle is the basis of all confusion. This principle is the basis of all information. Everyone is always experiencing absolutely transcendental, divine, subtle energy. Nothing but. Never have been. Never have been since the beginning of time to the end of time and beyond. That's all that there is. How come everyone doesn't know it? Because of this principle of misinterpretation, this principle of, it's subtle energy, but I'm interpreting it as a world. I'm interpreting it as a body. I'm interpreting it as a life. I'm interpreting it as causality. I'm interpreting it as limitation. I'm interpreting it as pain. I'm interpreting it as failure. I'm interpreting it as problematic self-image. I'm interpreting it as all the psychological phenomena we experience. I'm interpreting it as this, that, and the other. And all of a sudden, through this vast, complex of misinterpretation, a worldview is generated, in which all of a sudden I'm this flawed, damaged little semi-evolved primate wandering around in this vast universe which is other than me and is largely threatening, or at least challenging. And what do you do about that? I mean, God, what a problem. And this or something very vaguely like it is the worldview that most modern people perhaps think they inhabit. And when in actuality the only thing present is a transcendental field of subtle energy. How funny, how strange, what a good joke. So our challenge in yoga is not so much to find reality, to see the subtle energy, because in fact one never sees anything but. The challenge is to let go of our misinterpretations, which unfortunately we are so steeped in that we assume they're just objectively true. We don't even know they're interpretations, we just think it's a fact. Well, of course I'm my body. Of course I'm in my body. Of course I'm in the world. Of course the world's not me. These things are completely self-evident to most people. You go up to someone and say, you're not actually your body. You're not in your body. They're going to send you to the nut house. Or just, cross the street or whatever. I mean, these days they'll just look at you funny. So this is the challenge, the principle of Maya. So the yogi is basically, in one way of looking at it, the yogi is a soldier in a battle against Maya. Maya's the enemy. Maya's presenting as this and that and the other. Well, there is no this, that, and the other. It's just this. And so the yogi comes up against the this, that, and the other, and no, it's not this, it's not that, it's not the other. It's this. It's this actuality. This actual presence, which is undefinable. Maya's main weapon is subtle implication. Things seem to be this way, they seem to be that way, they seem to be the other way. And this seeming is Maya's weapon of mass destruction. All this seeming, all this innuendo. Because it doesn't have to be proved. You don't even need to prove it, you just need to imply it successfully enough to seduce consciousness into it, and the consciousness will greedily and eagerly take it to be true. So the yogi's main enemy, the yogi's main challenge, is coming up against all this seeming and penetrating the seeming to the actuality. And the actuality is always subtle energy. And Sanskrit is a wonderful word for the subtle energy, Shakti, which is all that is present right here, right now, and ever. But I don't particularly like to use that word because it's full of all sorts of implications and innuendo and history and interpretations within this tradition, that tradition, or the other tradition, all of which is just throwing fuel and throwing armaments into Maya's camp, because then it just has more implication and more innuendo, which of course is the challenge, not the solution. I've coined my own formula, I've coined my own phrase to describe the subtle energy more specifically. I call it radiant presence. Because that's one way of putting, of course it doesn't define it, but it's one way of putting what this is, because in some of its very common denominator nature, it is present. It is actual. Anyone have any challenge or any question to the fact that there is presence? There's presence. This is present. I mean, whatever it is present. There is presence, right? There's a here. Whether it's an actual here or not, we can leave it open, right? But there's here, or you're here, or this is here, or this is, or let's just call it being, isness, actuality. Okay, and I try to indicate this self-evident, very primal quality by this word presence, this notion of presence. And it is radiant because it always presents as something. It presents qualitatively. It presents as light, it presents as color, it presents as sound, it presents as thought, it presents as feeling, it presents as some kind of an eventfulness. Even you go into deep sleep, it's not nothing, is it? It's all sorts of whatever subtle stirrings there. It's always presenting. It's never nothing. Even when you're completely unconscious, say you've got a general anesthesia for open heart surgery or something. It's just about nothing. Okay, it's pretty close to nothing, but it's not actually nothing. And even if it was nothing, it would be an actual nothing, and the nothing would be the way that it was presenting. Because the true nothing isn't even nothing. It couldn't be nothing unless it was something. As soon as it's an actual nothing, then it's something that has a qualitativeness you're assessing as being essentially nothing. When this is all just silliness, of course. But the point is, is there a point? The point is to develop sensitivity and intelligence to be with this that is present in spite of and in the face of the fact that it is always having subtle implications, subtle suggestions that it's this, that, and the other. Subtle, what's the word? had a better word a little while ago. It's always seeming to be.
So what's the usefulness of that?
Of which?
Of what you say the yogi does. What's the usefulness of piercing Maya?
Discovering reality, discovering actuality, which in one sense is a zero-sum game. You don't actually gain anything by it. It doesn't change any condition. The realized being is not in a different condition than a person who lost in ignorance. In actuality, because it is still just this. What is present for an ignorant, so-called ignorant being in spiritual terms, and what is present for a realized being is exactly the same condition. But the realized being knows it, and there's a few subtle perks about knowing it that are kind of fun. Otherwise, there's no reason for it. And engaging in yoga and ultimately becoming realized is not something that one can decide to do or even want to do. It's something that very few people are driven to do. And so a sales pitch isn't really necessary. And the advantage is questionable. In a lot of ways, with realization, there's an enormous loss. Not an actual loss, of course, but an enormous superficial loss. In terms of the thrills, chills, and spills of being invested in treating your life as if it was actual, as if it was real, as if it was mattered. You're the star in a major soap opera production, and oh boy, is it juicy, right? And when you realize, you know that that's not the case, and you sit there bemusedly and look at the whole thing, and you look at all these people that think all this stuff matters and think they're actually in it and think it's actually happening in the way that they interpret it to be, and it's a very interesting state of affairs. So in a profound sense, it's kind of pointless. But nonetheless, for those of us who find ourselves drawn to this or impelled to this, more likely, then it becomes relevant to look at these issues, to look at these questions. But it's not like something that one ought to do. It's not like something it would be a great idea to go out on the street corner and try and hand out pamphlets and get more people to do this. A, it wouldn't work. People wouldn't be very interested. And B, it just doesn't work like that. It's sort of like wanting to become a virtuoso musician. There's a very small percentage of the population has any interest in that. And trying to get everyone to go out there to practice your violin 4 hours a day. It's not something that most people are going to be thrilled with. And yet for a few people, it's their lifeblood. It's like, yeah! And for those people, it's really interesting to get into the nuts and bolts of what music is and how violin is and so on. And this is the nature of yoga. Yoga is for people who are drawn to being a yogi. It's, you could say it's karmic, or it's destined, or it's an accident of your chart, your astrological chart, or it's grace of the divine, or however you want to spin it. But in point of fact, it just happens to be the case that a few of us are drawn to this insanity, or I guess that those of us that are drawn to it argue sanity. But again, that's a matter of how you spin it too. We'll have I probably should have said this in the beginning. I'll ramble on for a while, and then we'll have a little sort of a meditation / exploration for a bit, and then we'll take a break, and then we can chat about things and have a lot more discussion in terms of a give and take. But in general, I'll try and sort of lay out my presentation or overview of what this is about, just to so we have a frame of reference to look at this in terms of. But we'll be able to go into all the nuances and your takes on it, hopefully at great length.
So we should hold our questions?
Yeah. Yeah, in general, yeah. I mean, if something comes up that just seems really relevant, feel free to ask it. Worst, I'll skip over it, or look at you scornfully, or laugh derisively, or something. Probably not. Now, one aspect of the subtle energy is it presents itself. One of the quirks of the way it presents itself is it presents itself with very different densities. I'm sure that you all are familiar with more or less to various degrees with the maps of the chakra system. Perhaps you've seen the tree of life in Kabbalah. This little system of circles with lines connecting them, and all of these sorts of things, which are basically maps of, or they pretend to be maps of the degrees of density of the subtle energy. And of course, we all have experience of this experientially very much. It may seem as if physical sensation is fairly coarse, for example. That seems to have some impact, whereas thought is more tenuous, it's more delicate, it's more subtle, it's a little more ephemeral or ghostly in terms of its texture, in terms of its density, and so on. And even of course, thought, like thinking, if those that have spent much time meditating will notice, well, there's even subtler levels of thought than that make discursive thought seem as heavy-handed as a punch in the face, and so on. And then there's various, very, very subtle, vibes or moods or nuance that, basically are tenuous in the extreme, by contrast with sort of gross, superficial sensory experience, let's say. So this is another one of the facets of subtle energies. It presents on a gradation or spectrum of density. And most of if you look at most of the classifications of yoga, they actually seem to relate more to the degree of density of the energy engagement with the subtle energy. For example, karma yoga, which is engagement with the circumstances of your life, could be said to be engaging with a very dense aspect of the subtle energy. Circumstances, things, objects, interactions. Then if you move up to hatha yoga, let's say, you're no longer concerned with the environment, you're sort of in your body and your body's energy and your body's functioning and so on. Then you move into perhaps bhakti yoga, and all of a sudden it's more the emotions, the emotional state, and which is a little, maybe a little finer, a little less dense, less coarse than the physical energies. Then you go to Raja Yoga, concerned largely with meditation. You find yourself the center of focus is more with the mind and with mental attitudes and stances. Attitudes and stances isn't a good way to put it, but anyway, with sort of the mind, it's called layer of density of the subtle energy. And then in Jnana Yoga, we actually talked about Jnana Yoga for the first time. What's the medium that Jnana Yoga is concerned with? Well, Jnana Yoga is kind of fun. Jnana Yoga is about intelligence. And intelligence is a very interesting phenomenon. As most humans probably are used to thinking of intelligence as a byproduct or an index of measuring your ability to process thinking or thought in various ways. But intelligence is much more subtle than that. Intelligence is the very intrinsic structural nature of the subtle energy itself. The ordering principle of all form on every level is what this word intelligence refers to. Intelligence is how atoms know how to interact to form material objects. Planets are formed, galaxies are formed, solar systems are formed, bodies are formed, all as a result of intelligence. How does your DNA know to make you? What is DNA? These are all phenomena which are direct expressions of this principle of intelligence. Your consciousness, your ability to instantaneously assimilate in real time the vast panorama of information that presents itself in an instant of your experience. You don't need to think about it. You don't need to see you couldn't possibly catalog all of the different qualities you're experiencing in your field of vision in an instant. And just in one instant, you could spend the rest of your life and you wouldn't be able to catalog every shade of color or brightness you're seeing. You couldn't do it. And yet, with no effort whatsoever, in an instant your intelligence goes and completely engaged with all of it. How does this happen? This is this principle that I'm calling intelligence. And this is the principle that Jnana Yoga is let's say the level of density, so to speak, that Jnana Yoga engages with. Very rapidly, any genuine yoga becomes Jnana Yoga. Because there's no other way to actually engage with the subtle energy other than through intelligence. Because subtle energy is so multidimensional, so elusive, so evanescent, so unresolvable, that if you approach it with any degree of heavy-handedness right away, you're going to fall into some kind of a partial interpretation, which will just be another worldview, another missing the mark. To be able to be with the actuality of subtle energy, you have to do it on the level of actual intelligence, which is actually both doable and easy because it's what you are. You are intelligence. You are pure intelligence. Every subtle energy itself is pure intelligence. Consciousness is pure intelligence. What is doing all of this right now already is pure intelligence. I mean, how is the matter of this building, of this planet, holding together? How are all the atoms interacting so perfectly according to the laws of physics? How is your body staying alive? I mean, the number of systems that are dynamically equilibrating themselves in your body in real time, every instant, electrochemical adjustments and interactions and glandular, secretions and all of these phenomena, constantly adjusting. It's all being done in real time, effortlessly, spontaneously, by this amazing potency, let's call it. And so you are that. So it's easy to be that because you already are. It's easy to engage with things at that level because you already do. Although typically we may not notice we do because we're busy heavy-handedly interpreting ourselves as being human beings, needing to think about things, needing to talk about things, needing to muse about things, needing to mull over our motivations, instead of just settling into the spontaneity that's already occurring, which is a vastly superior mode of functioning to the normal human mode of functioning that most people define into existence through their misinterpretation of what they are and what this phenomena is. And any engagement with this actual subtle energy will very quickly sort of weed out your ability to. It's a self-filtering system. Your ability to engage with the subtle energy it teaches you how to do it intelligently, because if you don't do it intelligently, you spit off into delusory interpretation, and then you're just whirling back, not engaging with subtle energy directly or intelligently, which is the more sort of normal default human mode. So in any actual yoga, you are shown how, you are led gently, or maybe not so gently, into what this is, and it shows you how to do it. Not necessarily gracefully, not necessarily easily. It can be full of fits and starts, it can be full of shocks and confusions and, psychotic breaks and all kinds of things. these things can happen. But any genuine yoga ultimately defaults to intelligent engagement with subtle energy. Which is Jnana Yoga's basic mode. So the mode of Jnana Yoga is very much like the mode of a very slick, unscrupulous lawyer. You break the rules. You redefine things. You spin things to your own advantage. Because Maya tries to throw you some boilerplate, some suggestion, some innuendo that, oh, this is just this, and you have to be right there and cut through that. You have to say, no, it's not. It's not like that. It's subtle energy. And so, there's this ability to break out of systems, to be able to function outside of any system of rules, outside of any system of definitions or worldviews or philosophies. And so you can adopt philosophies as is convenient. Why not? Everyone else does. Although most people who have adopted a philosophy just sort of are stuck with it. So the jnani can jump ship if it's convenient to do so. Let's see. And of course, yoga is most often presented in a context that's more or less related to Indian tradition. But of course, there's nothing particularly Indian about yoga per se. There's nothing particularly Indian about subtle energy or about reality, about actuality. There's nothing but. So, of course, all human traditions consist of this, and many of them embody it. In the West, there's a tradition which is essentially jnana yoga, which is called Hermeticism, or the Hermetic tradition, which shows up in various historical modes. You have Kabbalah, as Sufism, as witchcraft, various things like this, which are Western modes of exploring subtle energy, of engaging with subtle energy. Let's see. I haven't touched on it. Well, it's a bit slipshod, but I think that's pretty much. I've touched a little bit on a bit of everything. It's very difficult to present this stuff systematically because it's not systematically. It's not hierarchical. It's not linear. It's not like subtle energy starts here and goes to there through such and through X, Y, Z steps of linear process. It's not like that. It's infinite and holographic. So anywhere you start, you sort of, the whole thing comes with, and you start at another place, the whole thing comes with from another perspective, and so it can be very bewildering to try and assimilatively address all of it. But at any rate, that's we've touched on a lot of points that are involved with this. If you'd like to, I can lead you in a little exploration, experientially. A little bit less of me talking and you listening, although I'll be talking and you'll be listening, maybe, if you like. And we can play with some of this stuff, looking at it more experientially and less verbally. And after that, we'll have a break, and then we can chat about all this stuff. Go into anything that I've brought up that I didn't put clearly enough, which is probably everything if you were paying attention. So it's probably good to sit up for this, although it's not essential. Just do a brief kind of experiment here.
We'll continue broadcasting, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Just do the broadcast on, sure. So please don't meditate. Don't hold anything back. Don't put yourself in any special stance or any other special stance. Just be loose and easy with your experience. Let it be what it is, however it is. It doesn't matter whether it goes here or there, whether it's this way or that way, whether it's sloppy and diffused or concentrated and spiky. Just let your energy be as it is, spontaneously and gently. And feel it. Feel the being of this present moment. Feel your being here. This is actual. This is real. This is actually happening. What is it that is happening? What is here? Don't answer the question, just feel it. What is here? Something's here. This is most definitely not nothing in any simple way. Light is present in consciousness. Your eyes are open, light is present. You close your eyes, light is still present. You go to sleep, light is still present. What is that? Thought is present. What is it that's present when thought is present? What's thought made of? What's the substance of thought that is present? You know you're thinking because you're feeling something present. What is it you're feeling that is present? Hearing is present, sound is present. What is sound? Where's your experience happening? You don't have to do your experience, do you? You can't stop it. Try and stop your experience. Try and stop vision. Try and stop hearing. Try and stop thought. Try and stop being. You can't do it, can you? How's that happen? What is it that's doing the being? What is it that's doing all this? Where does it come from? Where does it shine from? Just feel that. Loose and easy, relaxed. Just let it be whatever it is. Don't meditate. Just be in the present moment. Be in this event. Feel what it is. Feel the substance of it. The whole bubble of your experience sitting right here. What's it made of? You can feel it. You are feeling it. You've never felt anything else. What is it? always been exactly the same, hasn't it? It always looks completely different in every way, but it's never been any different. Always just like this. Just you here. How can you feel your experience? How can you feel light? How can you feel sound? How can you feel thought? How do these things show up? By what power? By what power is vision perceived? By what power is thought perceived? Just feel that. Does your experience have an edge? Does it have a top? Does it have a bottom? Does it have a front or a back? What is it? What is it that's here? What is it? What's it made of? What is this that's here? How is it here? What is seeing it? What's seeing your experience right now? Where is your experience being seen from? Is there actually anything other than the present moment? Feel this that's here. It's loose and easy. Don't stiffen up around it. Don't meditate on it. Just feel it. It's already here. It's natural. It doesn't require any effort. When you feel it, it shows you what it is. You can't say, it doesn't explain anything. But it's just, in a strange way, it shows you what it is. What is this that's here? What does it show you that it is? It's you, isn't it? You're here. You don't need to do yourself. You don't need to put yourself here. Just here, effortlessly, spontaneously. It just shows up. Here you are. No effort. It shows up. Completely done. Completely full. Completely complete. Entire. Always right here. What is that? Just feel what that is. Just feel it. Nothing special. Good. Very good. Just feel what's here. Can't say what it is, there's no way to describe it. But it's real. It's actual. It does itself. Feel it. Notice how you're already feeling it. You can't not feel it. You're already completely engaged with it. Its very presence, its very appearance is total engagement. Without any effort. Without any process. How does that happen? Doesn't make any sense. feel this. Feel this that's here. Nothing special, just loose and easy, relaxed. It doesn't require any special approach. You don't need to hold it. You don't need to pussyfoot about it. Just feel it. You can feel it any time. It's right here. It never goes away. What is this that's here? Just feel it. Doesn't matter if you're thinking, if you're not thinking. Doesn't matter what your mood is. Doesn't matter if you're happy or sad. This is here, this is present. Always. What is this that's present? Feel it and let it show you what it is.